All right, can everyone hear me okay? We're going to begin our webinar, which is Improving the Campus Experience with Density. And I have a special guest here today. Paul, can you say hi?
Hello, hopefully you can hear me okay. Welcome from the beautiful campus of the University of Notre Dame, where I'm the Director for Teaching and Learning Technologies.
Great, and my name is Ari Kepnes. I'm the Director of Market Research at Density. Today's agenda, we'll talk a little about Density so you get some context about who we are as a company. And Paul mentioned the beautiful Notre Dame. It really is. That's a picture on the right. We went and visited each other out on the campus, and we'll talk a lot about, after we talk a little bit about the people counting problems that happen on campus, we'll go into Notre Dame specifically and learn from Paul about how he thinks about this technology. And then we will take your questions. So on that note, there's a little Q folder either at the top or the bottom of your screen, a little icon, and you can click that and you can post questions as we're going. And then we will, at the end of our presentation, we'll take your questions and make sure to follow up if we don't get to them all. But please, this is supposed to be helpful and a resource to you, so don't hold back on asking questions. So what is Density? We are a people counting sensor platform. What that means is we create these sensors, these devices that go above a entryway, and then we're tracking in real time how many people are entering and exiting the space. And so this live data is not from a camera. It's not capturing any person identifiable information, but it's able to count how many people are in a space and collect the occupancy. And so we have that data set that we're going to use today to talk about some of the problems that it solves. And some high-level things quickly about Density is it is an accurate system, meaning it's able to discern accurately how many people are entering and exiting a space across your campus. And it's anonymous, and it is allowed for real-time, always-on data collection. So without further ado, here's a little bit about what this means for you. So in higher ed, some of the challenges that we help solve on the left are related to overcrowding and wait times of different parts of the campus. Data-driven space planning, so wanting to understand how are different parts of campus being used so that you can plan accordingly, save costs, and that comes into the operation use case, and security and life safety by knowing where people are in a space on a campus in an emergency. On the right, we have a list of about 10 different companies that we work, different higher ed institutions that we've been partnering with. And at the center there, I put University of Notre Dame because that is going to be our focus today. So as what this means for you is there's going to be a lot of different problems that you can solve across your campus, but we're going to be zooming in on University of Notre Dame specifically and some of the ways that they're using this data. But as you should know, there's a lot of different problems that you can solve related to both the student experience and operating and managing the higher education facility. All right, so what we're going to do here just is talk a little bit about specifically University of Notre Dame. So what are we looking at here with the left and the right? Paul, help us understand some of the context here for dining services.
So these are the two main dining halls at Notre Dame. They're called North Dining and South Dining. And we've got Density currently installed in both of them, North for the past year and South just as recently as the beginning of this fall semester. And you can see that they're pretty active and pretty crowded at peak dining hours. And then you see above, we can see the actual real-time count and a measure of how busy they are.
Great. So that was actually taken from this morning, right? So you were able to actually see
that was
this
about
morning.
11 a.m., 11:30 our time. So just before the crowding. But
right.
Yeah, this was data from today.
So Paul, let's zoom in actually and make this a little bit more real. We're going to open up and look at your dashboard here of North Dining. And what are we looking at here? This is the Notre Dame dashboard on the left and the right.
So one of the really nice things about Density is you can build these custom dashboards. And here's a couple of examples from our North Dining Hall. And you can quickly see if you look on the left, visits last week, Sunday through Saturday of last week, how busy the dining hall was day by day, but more importantly for us, meal by meal. So if you look at the right side, daily visits per segment, one of the really nice things about Density and these new dashboards is that this is defined in a way that's meaningful to dining services, who is the primary initial consumer of this data. So they can see breakfast, lunch, late lunch, and dinner. And we've recently gone to a open dining type model. So from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., students can come and eat whenever it's convenient to them.
Great. And then let's look at what this means in terms of, we have here visits per hour as well. And so, some of the conversations I've had with the dining services team, again, they're just one of the many stakeholders. You're on the Office of Information Technology, they're in dining services, but they've talked about how with this data, they can start to really forecast how much food they need to order and actually minimize it or manage. I just said minimize. That's a cool word. Manage and maximize their costs and expenses related to dining services so that they can have the right type of food, the right amount, and plan accordingly. So
before you leave that one, so one of the things that they were really interested in initially, specifically with North as a renovated new dining hall, was how do we staff this new all-day dining model, so we don't understaff at peak times or overstaff at quiet times. So initially they were using this data for building a more refined staffing model. Now they're starting to think about this data as, for sustainability, how do we cut down and have the right amount of food for the right hour and meal of the day.
Right. And that's something I think that's pretty interesting too, because what you can see here is the overarching patterns of day by day. And you can imagine if you look on the left here, we're now zooming in on the North Dining Hall, but you could see this across different parts of campus, right? So it's not just specifically a dining services tool. Of course, they can get a lot of impact from it, but you can start to see different spaces. So in just 1 second, Paul, I'd love for you to kind of talk to us about some of the implications for the real-time data, right? So we have this is a look at some of the mobile functionality, but tell us about some of the background of how you even got started with density and with a student that you worked with early on.
So 3 or 4 years ago, I was in charge of campus mobile and the campus Notre Dame mobile app. And we had a student come to us. We had an app development lab and test lab. A student came in, he said, I'd like to build my own custom app to go find empty study spaces or quiet floors or whatever in the library. We thought that was a cool idea. So that we started looking at options, and with some research, we came across density pretty much in its early stage. So we started really thinking about this for the library. Now it's actually actively used by dining services. And we're actually taking advantage with 2 students right now. One's a computer science major, another one is a math and statistics major. We're starting to think about how we can build our own custom views using the API that Density provides, not what you saw in the dashboards, which are very useful, but we're interested in building our own custom views, ultimately that will be consumed by students on their mobile devices.
Right. And so I have to say, as I went out there to Notre Dame and we talked and I got to meet the students that you work with, I was really energized to see that they were actually working with the data and trying to figure out, not only is it helping from an operational perspective, right, in terms of understanding how are these different assets used, but they wanted to do something with it to make their own lives easier and their own lives better, which was to actually understand in real time, which cafeteria should I go to? Which one is busier, which is not? And then also thinking through in the library, which floor is busy, which is not. So they didn't have to go all up and down the library just to find a spot to sit. So there's kind of the operational aspect of it, which saves cost. And as you mentioned with dining services, but you can imagine that across facilities. And you have the actual busyness in the real time, which is saving students a headache there. So, one thing to note here is that we have different installations for different use cases across Notre Dame. So this on the left is the density units, as you can see, gets installed above one of the entryways into the North Dining Hall. And on the right, this is an installation in the library. And Paul, you were able to assess that the technology worked in the library. Was that?
Yeah, we started off, early on with density in their early stage, and we started with the library because it was easy for us to take a couple of sensors and quickly install them in the basement library. There were only 2 ways in and out of the library. So you see the elevator bay, and then opposite that, there's just double doors to the library. So we started small. We assessed the technology. We were very impressed with the technology. And over time, dining saw this and they said, this would be great. We need it. And so they've expanded it. And we continue to work with the library to scale up. There are 14 floors in Hesburgh Library, and slowly but surely we're trying to figure out, where we want to go next. The higher floors are kind of our initial target or next target.
Sure. And just a quick note on that. We are installed rather with NYU, New York University. And as you can imagine, real estate there is very expensive. So they were able to use the data with their density installation to also justify space planning decisions around, do I need computer lab rooms? Do I need specific rooms for IT for the students to use? How much are they actually using those very expensive computer labs and those resources, and justify either expanding or not expanding some of their space planning initiatives? So that same data, again, is being used by the students, it's being used by the administrators in the operation, and it's being used by the campus facility. And then on the other hand, too, you can imagine, God forbid, in an emergency situation, the security and life safety, the use case there of trying to know where are people for evacuation or emergency scenarios. So that one piece of data layer can be used across campus, across teams. And that's really what we're seeing. That's really exciting about how it's shaping the overall campus experience. So on that note here, I want to just highlight how the technology works. Paul had mentioned that they were evaluating our technology. And the real thing to highlight here is that it's not a camera. We are not installing cameras across campuses. It's actually using computer vision and machine learning to accurately and with privacy first approach be able to detect how many people are entering and exiting the space in real time. And so on the left.
So Ari, I might mention here, this was very important to our library. We would have never been allowed to put in a live camera with any identifiable information.
Sure. And thanks for adding that, Paul. So on the left here, you see this is what the sensor is collecting in terms of the environmental data. It's seeing here that here's all the different things of people entering and exiting. On the right, it's able to discern and abstract everything else except for a human entering, or in this case, 3 exiting the space. And it's able to do that with algorithms that are accurately detecting human objects versus non-human objects and ignoring the rest. So that's pretty exciting, and that's only really been able to be a reality because of new advances, and specifically our proprietary approach towards hardware. We've talked about the software for the beginning, but this is kind of how we collect the data. Now, just quick specs here. These devices get installed, I said, above an entryway. So you can imagine either that's a cafeteria, library, it could even be a stadium, it could be academic spaces. I know, Paul, your own office and your own spaces, they have density installed too. Is that right?
We have a sensor in our research lab that we actually use as part of our ongoing research on density.
Right. So you can imagine that there's classrooms, there's different study rooms, and all of those different pieces can be, made better through this data layer. So to get started, you take these devices, you're able to connect them through PoE, which is power over Ethernet, or just into a regular plug and then Wi-Fi. And then it's able to encrypt the data. It's able to get started with a connection with either Wi-Fi or that PoE. And we're able to kind of get up and running and to solve some of these problems across the higher ed landscape. So we're going to take your questions now. We wanted to kind of make sure that we had some time for that. And so we're going to open it up, and please feel free to enter your questions in the Q folder at the top or the bottom.
And Ari, I said I'm going to have to stand up and wave my hands because we have such an aggressive energy conservation program here. If I don't move regularly, my lights go out. So
sure, there you go. Let's see that. There you go. Nice. All right. So I understand that density is a sensor, but not a camera. What is it? A motion sensor, and is it wireless? Okay, great. So the sensor platform, if it's not a camera, it's actually using infrared lasers that you can't see. So it's scanning the area underneath an entryway all the time. And that non-visible light is actually looking for depth patterns. And it's able to discern, okay, that's a human head and that's something else. And it's able to match that accurately. and measure that in real time. All right, another question here we have is, how does density integrate into other systems? Great, so if you have a specific system that you'd want to integrate density into, whether that's a mobile app, for example, like if you're working with Moto Labs, you have your own proprietary mobile app, our API, great point, can integrate into those systems, and that's how Paul's students have been able to get up and running. But we'd want to know kind of what are you working with, what data set, and then how we can integrate accordingly. But we have built an API to be able to do that. How wide of an area can it scan? Good question. So this is able to measure a double door entry. So we showed earlier that there was a double door into the dining room, into the cafe, and that's been able to, so that it can detect entrances and exits as wide as that 12 feet area.
So
now,
what I would say, Ari, is that almost all of our sensors that we have installed in the 4 locations on campus, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, are double wide doorways.
Right.
And we've had good luck with them in single and traditional double wide doors.
Cool. And then we have another question here, which is around it being wireless. So it does require a connection, and that's because it's basically always on, and it's always being able to collect this data. And so it needs a way to be connected. So it's either connected through like a regular power outlet, or through PoE, power over Ethernet plus. And what that means is that we're able to accurately kind of always be collecting and make it a part of the ongoing infrastructure of whatever space you have. And I know, as Paul could talk to, he mentioned a redesign, but we were able to get in at the early stages. And then as there's ongoing redesign, we can also have those units be just a part of that space. All right. Great question here. Can it be used as a security system? I'm glad that someone asked that. Thank you, because we really didn't touch on that. And like I said at the beginning, there are many use cases, and we can't get to all of them in these 15 minutes, but I will talk about security specifically. We've actually been seeing a huge uptick, unfortunately, because of where we are in our times, of needing this type of technology for life safety as well as security. And the 2 use cases there are, number 1, in the event of emergency, the security teams need to know in real time where are the students on campus, and you can actually make it so that certain teams can get that data versus if it's non-administrators, to lock off that data. So in the event of emergency, you'll be able to see where are the students, but make that data only available to the people who need it. And then the second big use case that we're seeing is around this idea of tailgating, it's called, where one person will badge in, but because we have a people counting sensor, we can detect if one person badges in and multiple people enter, we are able to alert the staff. So what that means in actuality is for residence halls, for certain cafeterias, for other secure spaces, for places that are just for administrators and professors, for example, when one badge is in, it's able to detect in real time through the integration with the access control system, oh no, 2 people entered, and trigger an alert. So that's also been a huge influx of demand for universities to want to try that out. Okay, and then another question here, can you speak about device cost and program? Also, are the units mobile? Okay, great. So I am happy to have that question here, because what we want to do now is make it real and helpful for you. So what we would urge you to think about is it's almost Thanksgiving. It's a great time to get into some of these spaces while they're not heavily trafficked. And what we recommend is, we're happy to just talk to you about a specific problem or a pilot that you want to have, send you a few units, and get started to start collecting that data, as Paul said, to validate that it is solving one of your questions or answering one of your hypotheses of a space, and then get started. So we're doing a real push to enable you guys to get started around Thanksgiving time, and we're happy to make a few of those units available, whether it's you want to start with 5 or 10 or more. And the way that we have the business model set up is that you have access to the data with an ongoing kind of data model, almost like you buy the cell phone and then you buy the service to it. We sell the devices, and then we sell the ongoing access to the data, whether that's integrated or you just want the dashboard that Paul demoed. Okay. Any other questions we have here? Okay, so I'll just ask one to Paul as we end up. So Paul, I think when we spoke, I was really impressed by how much fluency you have in this world of technology for higher ed. Is there anything that you want to leave in the minds of people as they're kind of thinking through this technology, as they're thinking through whether or not this type of technology might be helpful for their space?
Yeah, what I would say, I mean, we've got obvious business use cases here that you've seen. We highlighted dining. What's been really interesting for me and my students is that we're really using this in a different way than you might think, and I think university folks will get this. We're actually turning this into a pretty interesting and involved and pretty deep research effort. And we've got other faculty interested in this research. You know, data science is the super hot discipline right now. So essentially, we're using this as both a data science. I mean, these centers throw off just an amazing amount of data every day, and you know, you can do all kinds of interesting things with the data, and also just as a test bed for a modern API platform. So I would just throw that out there, is that, you know, beyond just the obvious use cases that we discussed that make sense, there's some research, there's some really interesting research possibilities here for what density offers.
Yeah, and I would say, Paul, I keep on being also similarly impressed and kind of amazed by all the different use cases. We don't want to overwhelm you with them, but you know, whether it's the dining services, whether it's you're working with students and you want them to kind of play with the data and help with the problem of busyness and being able to know where to go in the library or the dining services, or whether it's a library or a large auditorium or a large space where people gather, really any space where people are using and you have a density of people, density matters, right? And one other thing I'll just note on the end here is that, you know, we're working with a university where they had a chapel house. They had a house of worship, and they wanted to know how are different students are they actually attending that programming? Are they attending that service? Or, you know, how many people are in that class? So that attendance data is really the backbone, and we see it as the missing link of connecting your building to your operations and deriving experience from it. So it's our hope that you ask yourself, what are some of the problems that I work with every day where we maybe could use this technology? And then it's our job to get you up and running as fast as possible so you can validate that and get set up for success. So I have the email here of sales@density.io. Please feel free to follow up with any other questions you have. And Paul, I just want to thank you personally for sitting here and being a resource for us all, and then everyone else for joining as well. So thanks, and have a great rest of your day, guys.
Thank you, Ari.